Welcome to today's webinar discussion, the Financial Empowerment Ecosystem Model, Building Financial Wellbeing in Communities. We have a great kind of packed agenda today. If you go to the next slide, Hannah. We are going to start off with Marlene giving us a bit of an introduction to the Financial Empower Ecosystem Model. After Marlene finishes, we'll break everybody into small group discussions where you'll have a bit of a chance to debrief, like what does this look like in my community? What are my questions? We'll have a big debrief and give you a chance to ask your questions to Marlene and to others, and then just a few closing announcements. If you'll go to the next slide. So I just want to briefly introduce our speaker today, our guest speaker, Marlene, who is the Director of Program Delivery and Integration at Prosper Canada. She's responsible for managing Prosper Canada's externally funded projects and implementing service system integration as part of Prosper Canada's scaling strategy. Marlene has 15 years of audit and financial experience in both the public and the private sectors, and she joined Prosper Canada in 2015 to better align her passions with her career by employing her skills and talents to enhance the lives of others. Marlene is a returning guest speaker for Tamarack and Cities Reducing Poverty. We're very lucky to be partnering with Marlene and her team as they're so dedicated to spreading the learning on how we create more financial opportunities and access for people living on low income. So welcome, Marlene. I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Natasha. Welcome, everybody. I'm very pleased and honored to be speaking with all of you today on what we feel at Prosper Canada is a very important topic. I'll just give you a quick overview of the webinar journey that I'd like to take you on. First, I'll start with some level setting by actually defining the problem that we at Prosper Canada are trying to solve with our partners through an ecosystem approach. And for the reason that you join me here today, I will walk you through what exactly this financial empowerment ecosystem model is, which we refer to as prosperity gateways. And I'll move you into some examples after that to give you a better sense of what exactly this can look like in action. And as Natasha said, we'll move into some breakout groups, some group sharing and debrief, and then Q&A. So why don't we get started? So I'll tell you a little bit about our organization if you're not yet familiar with us. Prosper Canada is a national charity that is dedicated to expanding economic opportunity for Canadians that are living in poverty through innovation, both in terms of program as well as policy. We work with partners in all sectors to do this, to develop and promote policies and programs and resources that transform the lives and help Canadians to prosper. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we hope to get to a place where all Canadians will have access to the financial programs, services, products, and advice that they need to build their financial well-being, whatever that means to them. Although Prosper Canada is Canada's leading champion of financial empowerment, we certainly cannot do this alone. To achieve this vision, like I said, we do this work all in partnership. We do that in partnership with governments, businesses, and community groups across the country, which is fundamental to the success of our efforts. We help organizations and large systems that are on lower incomes to do this work. And we do that by helping these organizations to design and implement financial empowerment solutions that are sustainable in the long run, that last, that align with the goals of the organizations themselves and ultimately will measurably increase the financial well-being of the people that they're trying to serve. So let's talk about what this problem is. So Canadians report that their personal finances are the primary cause of stress in their lives. This is reflected in record high household debt, historically low savings levels, and a rising debt delinquency and bankruptcy. 41% of Canadians cite money as their biggest problems, and this number rises to 60% for those that are living on lower incomes. So people clearly that are living in poverty are the most financially vulnerable of all, given this changing economic environment, as many have no financial back on in the face of job loss, illness, or some other income interruptions. Many are also burdened by debt in order to be able to make ends meet and finding it increasingly difficult to cope. Financial literacy alone, although helpful, is actually not enough to enable low-income people to tangibly improve their financial security. And research and evidence and feedback from our own community partners indicates that additional supports are needed to help these individuals overcome both systemic and other barriers. And living on limited financial resources requires these people to make difficult financial decisions on a day-to-day basis, since so much of their income goes towards these basic needs. So identifying these barriers is the first step in actually identifying what the right solutions are to overcome them. But ultimately, the price of insecurity is not just in the face of these individuals. It actually trickles down into the communities that they live within. And so with the rise of precarious work, more households are clearly experiencing unstable and unpredictable monthly income flows that make it increasingly difficult for them to budget, plan, and save. And what that means is that because of this, these individuals are also unable to pay their taxes and their utility bills. You see rising rates of homelessness, public health problems. And so it's clear that the cost of financial insecurity is actually a cost to the city as well and the local communities that they live in. And in fact, a study conducted by the Urban Institute released back in January of 2017 specifically stated that when residents lack adequate incomes, they quantified that the cost to the cities that they live in is between 0.3 and 4.6% of the city's total annual budgets. So again, there's a cost both to the individual and to the communities. So a problem that definitely needs to be resolved. The issue is that currently no sector is well equipped to address these problems. Mainstream financial institutions, for an example, are challenged to deliver the products and services that low-income people need because, frankly, frontline staff in many cases aren't required to have that additional training to understand those specific needs and barriers. Financial products, services, and advice are often designed for more middle and high-income individuals. And from a frontline government and community service provider perspective, often these individuals and organizations rarely have the mandate and the knowledge and the skills to deal with the causes of financial vulnerability in low-income households. Things such as poor access to neutral and relevant financial information, that individuals in these circumstances have difficulty accessing income benefits through tax filing or other programs, in some cases because of literacy issues, numeracy issues. They have lower non-existent savings. These individuals have high debt to income levels, poor credit scores, and as a result often have to rely on costly or predatory fringe financial services, which only complicates matters worse. So what do we do about it? And so the solution that I'm presenting here today is premised on both financial empowerment and how to address the solution through an ecosystem model. So I'll first start talking about, for those of you that aren't familiar, with what we mean when we say financial empowerment framework. First, we see this framework as a necessary piece to overcoming the risks of financial vulnerability. The financial empowerment approach focuses on community-level strategies that encompass 5 main types of interventions that you see on your screen that have been identified as both necessary for low-income households to improve their financial outcomes, as well as effective at helping them to do so. Financial empowerment as an approach focuses on strengthening financial inclusion, knowledge, behaviors, and opportunities for people with low incomes. These are pieces that are key determinants of economic security, but as I said in the previous slide, are a critical gap in our current social support systems, because these organizations that these individuals go to for support often lack the mandate, resources, and capacities to address these specific financial dimensions. Financial empowerment solutions enable Canadians with low incomes to measure and improve their financial outcomes, such as income, credit scores, savings, and debt levels. In doing so, this results in more disposable income and savings that enable individuals and households to better afford basic needs and achieve financial stability, enabling them to move beyond a state of concentrating on immediate needs alone and being able to even just start focusing on the future. This in turn enhances their access to proven routes out of poverty. These routes include education, training, employment, entrepreneurship, asset, and home ownership. But let's be clear that financial empowerment as a framework is not intended to enhance or replace traditional poverty reduction efforts. it's to supplement them. And so we want to be clear that this is not to replace many of the strong existing poverty reduction efforts that you may have in your community. Financial empowerment solutions are actually showing to enhance and improve the outcomes of those same strategies. So I move on to the ecosystem model, and Prosper Canada now more recently lovingly refers to that as our prosperity gateways. And that essentially is helping to expand access to financial empowerment support for Canadians living on low incomes. And we're doing this through this initiative. Our aim is to reduce poverty by building these services in ways that enable people on low incomes to move from poverty to prosperity. And as noted earlier, we strongly feel that this approach will help us get to the vision of a place where Canadians have access to the financial programs, services, and products that they need to build their financial well-being. But this is going to take many players to achieve this goal. And so specifically about the ecosystem model, all of these players that you see highlighted in this diagram here are who we see as being necessary stakeholders and contributors to the solution. It'll require a cross-sectoral ecosystem approach. And we, as Prosper Canada, are trying to, as a backbone organization, connect all these players together and mobilize them in order to help achieve this goal. But this isn't an emerging field. And so our long-term focus, this will be a longer-term focus, and it will take some time. If we were to use business language, we would say we're trying to build a new financial empowerment market where funders and buyers exist to purchase the supports for people with low income from service providers, such as frontline community organizations and governments that are using their policy and regulatory powers to create a marketplace that gives low-income people a real chance to succeed. We believe that this approach is essential for a few reasons. First, upstream and policy regulatory changes can be the most cost-effective way to improve financial security, inclusion, and protection. They make it easier for people to achieve financial well-being by reducing the number who need support programs in the first place. So without policy work, we are treating systems and not the causes. And that's why we have policymakers as part of this ecosystem. Secondly, some people will always need help no matter what. And so we also need to build capacity in communities to respond to this need. And so because financial empowerment is still relatively new in Canada, this capacity doesn't exist in many places. And so ensuring that we have that capacity through frontline service organizations, be it nonprofit or private or even government, is a necessary piece of the wheel. If for programs to achieve any level of scale and sustainability, they need to have stable funding sources. And so the best way to achieve this is that when governments are fiscally constrained to integrate into pre-existing funding frameworks and systems, we need to find other funders to help to supplement that as well. And so that's part of our, as we see as our role in expanding this ecosystem. We also need knowledge to deliver effective policies and programs, knowledge about people's needs, how they are changing, and what approaches work best to meet these needs. So ongoing research and knowledge mobilization are critical to driving innovation and continuous improvement. And so that's why we have researchers also in the circle. And lastly, but not least, working concurrently on ecosystem elements will accelerate programs. This is going to be a hard road, we recognize that, but while hard initially, we strongly feel that a critical mass once achieved of opinion leaders and decision makers that are engaged and that networks have been built, and we have a good, strong basis of proof points and cases in Canada. These will generate the new initiatives and effects and independent actions that will be required to achieve our ultimate goal. This is the tipping point at which take-up begins to expand and speed up, and we're really excited to help support that way. This is not a new approach for our organization at Prosper Canada. As I said earlier, we have always worked in partnership. We're just helping to crystallize it and make it more well understood, and to actually help other communities see this as an effective approach as well for poverty reduction efforts. We have been active in many areas in this past, and many vibrant communities I know that are already working with a similar collective impact approach. So that's the theory in a circle, but I'd like to kind of show you how that's actually taking practice in some of our work more directly. So from a community frontline perspective approach, over the last 3 years, Prosper Canada has been working with 14 nonprofit organizations across Canada and their partners to help scale financial empowerment solutions and deliver them to the people that need it the most. And just really exciting numbers that we're always really thrilled to share is that within those just over 3 years, together these sites have helped over 270,000 people with low incomes to build financial health through those various interventions within our framework, depending on what their needs are. And within that number, 109,000 of those through tax filing assistance, as well as assistance for accessing benefits that they're eligible for. These individuals have been able to access over $305 million in new income. That's money that's gone directly back into their pockets and back into the communities that they exist in. In terms of working with city governments as another part of our ecosystem model, we see city governments, but this could equally apply to other levels of government as well that provide services to clients that live on lower to modest incomes as a critical piece of this ecosystem puzzle. The Canada's Prosperity Gateways program is specifically focused on expanding access to financial empowerment supports for Canadians living on low incomes. And right now our focus is currently on integration of these supports into municipal service delivery. Prosper Canada is helping city governments to reduce poverty by building financial help into the services that they already deliver, not creating new programs, but in ways that enable residents to move from poverty to prosperity, as well as improving the outcomes of the programs that these cities are already delivering. And on your screen, these are some examples of where financial empowerment could very well work successfully to integrate into existing service delivery. So for example, if we look at employment, a client that's coming in and getting employment assistance through their local city provider would be offered financial empowerment assistance. And there are case studies and evidence that shows that not only in helping them to achieve greater financial well-being, the actual outcomes that employment program is trying to achieve have also shown to improve as well. And so just to be clear, these supports include things like financial coaching, counseling, essentially one-on-one financial help, tax clinics, offering tax clinics and tax assistance, helping to access benefits to improve participant income, and integrating financial empowerment into large service systems like government is a cornerstone of our scaling strategy here at Prosper Canada, because we see this as a sustainable way to integrate these services, because these governments are already well-resourced, already serve low-income clients, and have a mandate, an existing mandate to help improve the financial outcomes of these individuals as well. So we see it simply just makes sense. And so our Prosperity Gateways initiative has just launched recently, and we are currently working with 2 cities in Canada, Edmonton and Toronto, to help them tackle poverty head on by helping them identify new pathways to prosperities for their own residents. We use a structured human-centered consulting approach to help our city partners to identify, design, and integrate these services into their existing programs that they deliver. We work from an asset-based approach. So that means building upon what already exists within their local communities in terms of financial empowerment programs, services, and capacity in order to support these individuals. So we're looking at what already exists and building from there and not starting from scratch. With Toronto, they've identified that we will be looking at their public library services as a system stream to integrate financial empowerment. And within the city of Edmonton, exploration activities will focus on their transit and recreation subsidy programs. And so just to kind of further support why this makes sense, the reality is that too often hidden financial problems prevent residents from really fully benefiting from the programs and services that municipalities provide them. And so there's strong evidence actually coming out of the US more significantly that building financial empowerment into government and community programs builds what is referred to as a super vitamin effect. Boosting the outcomes by removing barriers to financial inclusion, alleviating financial stressors that impede participant success, and connecting people to opportunities to build wealth. This term super vitamin, we can't take credit for it here at Prosper Canada. It was actually coined in the US and was used to describe the financial empowerment approach taken by the New York City Office of Financial Empowerment as they implemented financial empowerment into social services within their own jurisdictions. And so now that I've kind of walked you through the theory, I thought it would be helpful to show you, well, what could this actually look in action? And so the examples that I'm about to offer you are illustrative and not prescriptive. How prosperity gateways look and how you build them locally within your financial empowerment ecosystems should and would look different in your community, depending on the clients that you're trying to support, the capacity that have your environment, your financial constraints. And so these are just examples. And as I said before, municipal service integration is definitely a newer innovation in Canada, but it has strong and proven roots within the US. So these examples are US based. And so the New York City of Financial Empowerment was one of the first cities to do this, but there's actually almost 50 cities now that are following this approach to help reduce poverty in their local jurisdictions. And just to state, in terms of sustainability, these programs are funded through a combination of public, private, and nonprofit funding models. So the first example that I'm going to share with you is focused around the public utilities service within a number of cities that were in the US. This was a pilot that was led by the US National League of Cities and Youth Education and Families Institute. It involved 5 cities in the US, example Houston, Louisville, Newark, and the funders were the Ford Foundation. Essentially, the model was that public water utility staff identified financially insecure customers who were behind in their utility payments. And once they were identified, they were offered financial coaching as an assistance. Customers that agreed to be a part of the pilot and to receive that coaching were also offered help to restructure their outstanding utility debt into achievable payments and examine other debt and financial concerns in their lives, because likely, if you're having a hard time paying your utility bills, there's probably some other financial circumstances that are happening in the background as well. As a result of this program, customers were also eligible for incentives and supports, including phone calls and texts from utility staff at the city that helped to encourage these individuals to stick to their financial plans and goals with some financial tips and knowledge to boost that area of their life and to really stay on track. Lift Up was offered to 3,205 utility customers, and there's just some highlights here, which are really impressive in terms of the impact of this work. If you look at Houston in particular, in terms of payment patterns, there was an increase in the likelihood of paying bills more frequently with those clients that were in the program in the ways of 69%. The city, in terms of the cost to the city, saw a reduction in water bill balances at 34% within Newark. And there was a 53% decrease in the likelihood of experiencing service termination for those clients, also a cost to the city when that has to be implemented into the client. So this is an example of how using an ecosystem approach, using nonprofit partners as the coaches, the city staff is kind of the intake and the assessors, and the funders through the foundations in trying to address poverty and help these individuals while boosting the outcomes of the public utility department. Just quickly, also San Antonio had a similar ecosystem model but focused on homelessness. This was through their housing and relocation program. So access to that program is obviously a critical need for many people, including those in San Antonio. This program provided financial assistance, housing relocation, and stabilization services to people who were identified as being at risk of becoming homeless. Through that program, participants were required to receive more than 1 month of financial assistance. They participated in 6 hours of financial literacy seminars. They received 3 hours of one-on-one financial coaching, and they were supported to save 30% of their monthly income. Of those that exited the program, over 89% of participants were in their own rental unit, including many of who were homeless at the start of the program. And so if you're thinking about, okay, this sounds great, but what does this mean for me? And so we want to be clear that starting prosperity gateways in your own community doesn't have to be a very complicated process. You can start from small and build from there. Municipal governments don't actually need to deliver financial empowerment supports on their own. In many cases, it may be more cost effective to establish referral pathways to other local service providers, such as nonprofit organizations, foundations, or even banks, to deliver the financial help your clients need. Excuse me. In some cases, however, municipalities may find it more effective to deliver this help on their own. It's a matter of figuring out where the need is most and how to best to do it. And so the refer partner do it yourself assessment is part of the work that Prosper Canada does with their city partners to designing these integration opportunities. Oop, back on our slide. And just lastly, just to give you a bit more of a thought in terms of what this could look like in your community. If an individual or family comes into your city gateway, and that gateway can be, for example, employment, housing, or settlement, that city staff has its initial touch point. They are the gate. And they, through a process that is designed, conduct a bit of an assessment to understand the client's financial employment support needs at that time, coupled obviously with whatever program that they're trying to deliver. So in addition to their employment needs. Based on that assessment, the city then decides, are they going to support that client directly in getting that financial empowerment support, or are they going to work with somebody else to do that? And so this is just an example. Let's say a city says, okay, we want to offer benefit screening assistance, one-on-one financial help, and income tax clinics, but we don't want to do it all on our own. So they've decided through a research and the process that we kind of walk them through that they're going to deliver the benefit screening assistance on their own, so that employment counselor is going to actually help with that benefit screening and assistance. But where that client is identified as needing more intensive one-on-one financial help, they're going to refer to a community nonprofit partner that they're working with. And they're going to actually host income tax clinics, but they're not going to actually do the income tax filing. They're going to partner with their local provincial accounting body, get volunteers to help staff those income tax clinics, but they'll coordinate them as the host. So in terms of the now what, just quickly, I think we've touched upon this earlier, but if you're interested in approaching your work through this Prosperity Gateways lens, again, starting from small and working on what you have would be our first recommendation. Identify what financial supports are already available in your community and work from there. And then start, from an ecosystem perspective, connect the dots. Try to see if you can connect referral pathways from one program or one service provider to another to help do that kind of intake and referral or intake and partner lens to integrating financial empowerment into existing service delivery. Explore potential partnerships to expand existing services. Create and help animate a Prosperity Gateway Collaborative. And I heard even through our own working group that a lot of that's working already, and we see that as a critical part of this ecosystem model. And also contact Prosper Canada. We're very passionate about this work and are always looking and eager to work with partners that share the same vision as we do. You can visit our website. If you want to click to the next slide. So what I was referencing first, so the Learning Hub is a resource. It's an online compendium of different resources, partly in terms of helping frontline practitioners do this work. And so there's some examples here of different tools and toolkits in the different areas of the financial empowerment framework. But there's also a great library of resources in terms of research papers and studies and articles that talk about things like the evidence and support in building the case for this work that I encourage you to take a look and explore in. And so the link is there at the bottom, learninghub.prospercanada.org. And just to the last slide. And in terms of our Prosper Canada Gateways program, we have a site on our website now at prospercanada.org. I think that's a backslash gateways. They'll give you more information about that, but just generally speaking about how we do our work at Prosper Canada, different areas of our work. We encourage you to visit us there, sign up for our newsletter, and then if you'd like to speak to me directly, I'm definitely willing to have a chat, and my contact information is attached there.